You know that feeling, right? You're deep in the work, emails are piling up, meetings are back to back, your to-do list just keeps getting longer. But at the end of the day, or maybe looking back over the week, you feel utterly exhausted, but have this nagging sense, was I actually productive?
Yeah.
Did I really move the needle? Or maybe you've been in a conversation or a meeting and everyone seems to agree, nodding along, but you walk away thinking, are we really on the same page here?
That disconnect, that feeling of intense activity without corresponding value or shared understanding, it's incredibly common in modern work.
It really is.
It's not just frustrating, it's costly.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a stack of insights specifically curated for you, the listener, to unpack why traditional approaches to work often fall short in today's fast-paced, knowledge-driven environments. We'll explore fundamental concepts like the productivity paradox, the crucial difference between push and pull systems, and why bedrock human skills, like listening, are actually more critical than ever.
And we're going to bring it right up to the minute. How does AI fit into this picture? Is it just going to make us more efficient at being dysfunctional, or can it truly help us work smarter?
Right. Our mission today is to be your guides through this source material, the articles, the research, the transcripts you've provided, kind of extracting the most important nuggets. We want to give you a clear, actionable understanding of how to work smarter, not just harder.
Yeah.
How to truly prioritize people and the way work gets done, and how to effectively leverage tools like AI to actually enable better outcomes.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with that feeling, that being busy but not productive thing. The sources dive deep into this, and they have a name for it, right? The productivity paradox.
That's it. It highlights a core problem. We're often taking ways of thinking and organizing work that came from, the industrial age, where more inputs, more hours, more activity directly equaled more physical output.
Right on an assembly line.
Exactly. And we're applying them to knowledge work, product development, service delivery. Work that requires creativity, complex problem solving, collaboration. That kind of work doesn't scale linearly with just brute force or adding more time.
And here's where I found it really interesting in the sources. This isn't just about poor planning. It's fundamentally about how our brains actually work. We have biological limits.
Totally.
The sources talk about limited working memory. You can only consciously hold and manipulate, like a few pieces of information at once.
Exactly. And every single time you switch tasks, checking that email, switching browser tabs, answering a supposedly quick question, you leave something behind. The sources call it attentional residue.
Attentional residue.
Yeah, part of your brain is still kind of chewing on the previous task.
It's like trying to clear your computer's RAM, but it takes a while to actually flush it.
Precisely. And the more you switch, the more that residue builds up. Studies cited in the sources show this task switching, this multitasking myth, which is really just rapid switching, not doing things simultaneously, it can tank your productivity by 40% or even more.
40%. Wow.
And then there's your brain's filter, the reticular activating system. It gets overwhelmed by constant notifications, dings, pings. It starts treating them like potential threats, triggering stress.
Which is terrible because that stress actually damages the parts of our brain we need for focus and planning, right?
Yeah.
So trying to power through overload literally makes you less capable of focusing.
And that's exactly why traditional rigid time management or just pushing people to be more efficient often falls flat.
Yeah.
It's optimizing for a machine, not respecting the realities of the human brain. It's like trying to cram more and more chairs into a room that's already full.
Or applying assembly line thinking to something that needs flexibility.
Right. Or trying to apply that kind of efficiency to work that needs adaptability and, frankly, creative space.
There was one example from the sources that really stuck with me. A team under huge deadline pressure, facing mandatory 60-hour weeks. Analysis showed their quality just plummeted after about 45 hours. So counterintuitively, they shortened the work week.
You cut hours.
Yeah. And the result, they actually hit the deadline faster and with better quality. Less time, more focus, better outcome.
That story gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It forces you to ask, what are you actually measuring? Are you tracking inputs, the hours logged, the tasks started, the appearance of busyness?
Right, the activity.
Or are you focused on outcomes, the actual value delivered, the problem solved for customers, the successful completion of meaningful work? Our focus directs our energy, and, measuring the wrong thing leads to optimizing for the wrong thing.
So if just working harder doesn't work, and our brains have these built-in limits, how should work flow? How do you manage work in a way that respects these realities and actually delivers value efficiently?
This is where the sources highlight a really fundamental shift, moving from push to pull systems.
Push versus pull.
Yeah, a traditional push system basically shoves work onto teams or individuals regardless of their actual capacity at that moment.
Like someone just dropping a pile of reports on your desk and saying, need these by Friday.
Exactly that. Or a manager assigning a new feature to a development team without checking if they actually have the bandwidth to take it on right now and do it well. This inevitably leads to overload.
Makes sense.
And as the sources describe, when you push work to an already overloaded system, performance doesn't just drop a little, it degrades exponentially.
Exponentially. Wow.
Yeah, it leads to burnout, mistakes pile up, you get rework. Think of it like adding even just a few extra cars onto a highway that's already at peak congestion suddenly. Everything just grinds to a halt. Total gridlock.
I remember reading that example in the sources about the manager whose team's performance absolutely tanked because he just kept pushing more and more work onto them. He was confusing their busyness with actual productivity. Got himself fired, apparently.
Precisely. The alternative, a pull system, is fundamentally different. Work isn't pushed onto you or the team. Instead, the team signals when they have capacity and are ready to pull in the next piece of work.
So they take work when they're ready for it.
They take work when they can actually focus on it and complete it effectively, without juggling 5 other things.
That feels counterintuitive, maybe. Won't things just slow down if you wait for people to be ready? Seems like work would pile up waiting.
It feels that way, but the sources show the opposite is usually true. Now, it does require trust and definitely a cultural shift towards what they call servant leadership, where managers focus on managing the flow of work rather than just directing people.
Okay, managing the work, not the workers.
Exactly. But this sustainable pace actually leads to faster overall completion times and significantly higher quality. Why? Because work isn't sitting idle, half-finished, constantly being interrupted and losing context.
Right, avoiding that attentional residue buildup we talked about.
Exactly. It allows for focus and finishing.
What's fascinating, though, is that implementing these pull systems doesn't have to be some massive, complex overhaul.
Yeah.
The sources outline some really practical strategies you can start applying right away, maybe even just with one team to start.
Absolutely. First one, visual work management, making the work visible. Often this is a Kanban board, those visual systems using cards or sticky notes to show work moving through different stages like to do, and done.
Yeah, I've seen those. Physical ones or digital tools.
Right. They help everyone see the flow, but maybe more importantly, they immediately highlight where the bottlenecks are, where work is piling up. There was that manufacturing team example. They put up a physical board and suddenly saw they had 47 items started but not finished.
47.
Yeah.
Just sitting there in progress.
Yeah. Just seeing that helped them realize the problem wasn't a lack of work, it was a lack of focus and finishing.
Okay, so visibility is key. What's next?
Second, work in progress, or WIP limits. This is really the core mechanism of pull. You explicitly limit the number of items a team or even an individual can work on at the same time.
Limit the number of tasks.
Yes. This simple act forces focus. It immediately sparks conversations about priorities because you can only start something new if you finish something old and free up a slot. It dramatically improves quality because people aren't stretched so thin, and paradoxically, it increases the rate at which work actually gets finished, what they call throughput.
So limiting the number of things being worked on actually helps you get more things done faster in the end. That really goes against that must juggle everything instinct many of us have.
It absolutely does, but it works because it respects those cognitive limits we discussed earlier. A common rule of thumb mentioned in the sources for teams is setting the WIP limit to maybe the number of people on the team minus 1 or 2. It forces collaboration and pushes things to completion.
Interesting. Okay, visualize work, limit WIP.
What's third?
Third, clear pull signals. You need to define exactly when capacity opens up and a team is ready for the next item. Is it when a card moves to the done column? Is it when the number of items in the doing column drops below the WIP limit?
Got it.
The trigger for taking new work.
Exactly. This signal needs to be unambiguous so teams know precisely when to pull. There was a marketing team example where they timed pulling new client tasks based on when key stakeholders were known to be available for review.
Wow.
Which dramatically cut down the waiting time for feedback and approval, speeding up the whole process.
Makes sense. Aligning the pull with downstream availability. Okay, fourth.
Fourth, Metrics that matter. This means stop focusing purely on utilization, whether everyone looks busy all the time.
The bums on seats metric.
Right. Instead, focus on flow metrics. Things like cycle time. How long does it take a single item to go from the moment work starts on it until it's actually finished?
Start to finish. And lead time. How long from the initial request by the customer or stakeholder until it's actually delivered? The total waiting time plus work time.
Okay, request to delivery.
That distinction is crucial. One team in the sources found their average cycle time was only 3 days, pretty good, right?
Yeah, sounds fast.
But their average lead time was 45 days. That told them work was actively being worked on for only 3 days, but sat waiting in queues for 42 days. 93% of the time, it was just idle.
Wow. 93% waiting time. That's staggering.
It is. Measuring flow efficiency like this highlights where the real delays are hiding, often in the handoffs and queues, not in the work itself. Also, tracking trends in these metrics is key.
Okay, measure flow, not just busyness. And the fifth strategy.
And fifth, continuous refinement. Pull systems aren't static. You don't just set them up and walk away. They're living systems you need to tune over time.
Like adjusting the WIP limits.
Exactly. Use regular team retrospectives, maybe every couple of weeks, to review your WIP limits, refine your pull signals, identify new constraints or bottlenecks that pop up in the flow. One team added a blocked column to their board.
To track things waiting on others?
Precisely. And they quickly saw that their main bottleneck wasn't their own work capacity, but waiting on responses or input from external departments. That insight led them to focus specifically on improving those handoffs.
Those 5 strategies feel very practical, actually. Start visual, set limits, define when you're ready, measure the flow, and keep adjusting. You could start small.
You really could start with one team, one workflow, and this whole philosophy respecting human capacity, managing the flow of value, prioritizing completion, it ties perfectly into a core principle of agile for product and service management, which is individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
That little word over feels so important there. It doesn't say instead of processes and tools, right? It's about priority.
Precisely. Processes and tools are absolutely necessary. You can't run a complex product delivery or service organization without them. They're the infrastructure, like the plumbing or electrical wiring in your house. You need them to handle complexity, to scale.
Right, they provide structure.
But, and this is the key point, they must serve the people doing the work. They should enable creativity, enhance collaboration, make problem-solving easier. They shouldn't become rigid, bureaucratic shackles that get in the way.
You don't want that situation where someone is, metaphorically trying to hammer in a screw.
Right.
Because the process documentation says step 3, use hammer.
Exactly. And sadly, many organizations trying to implement agile methods focus only on adopting the frameworks, the Scrum events, the specific roles, the software tools, which are often just codified processes and tools. Without doing the harder but more important work of enabling the necessary human interaction, the trust, the cultural shift towards collaboration. And that leads to what the sources call hollow implementations or zombie agile. It looks like agile, but the heart isn't there.
What about situations with really strict compliance or regulations? Healthcare, finance. Doesn't compliance or safety rules force processes to come first and be really rigid?
That's a really common assumption, but the sources push back on it quite strongly. They argue that regulators typically care that you meet the requirements, that the outcome is compliant and safe, not necessarily exactly how you structure your internal workflow to get there.
So the what matters more than the how?
Often, yes. The sources gave examples in healthcare with data privacy rules or in finance with Know Your Customer KYC regulations, instead of creating completely separate, burdensome compliance processes that people had to follow in addition to the normal work.
Which sounds awful.
Right. Teams integrated the proof of compliance like tagging data correctly, capturing necessary documentation directly into their normal product development or service delivery workflow. The process served the people, making compliance smoother and part of the flow, not an extra hurdle.
That reminds me of that idea of Chesterton's fence. You shouldn't tear down a fence or change a process until you understand why it was put there in the first place.
Exactly.
Don't just get rid of a process because it feels bureaucratic. Understand its original purpose. Then figure out if it can be refined or integrated differently to better serve the people doing the work now while still achieving its goal, like compliance.
Ultimately, this whole conversation circles back to rethinking what productive really means. It's not just visible activity, the constant typing, the packed calendar, the flurry of emails.
The busyness.
Right. It's the value created, the problem solved for customers, the insights gained. The sources even mention how some of their best ideas, those real breakthroughs, come during moments that might look unproductive to an old industrial mindset, like taking a walk by a lake or just having quiet time to think.
Yeah, the deep work often doesn't look like frantic activity. So the warning signs seem clear then.
Mm-hmm.
If your tools or your processes feel like they're actively hindering people from talking to each other, from collaborating effectively, or from just getting together to solve problems quickly,
Then the balance is off. The processes and tools are likely hindering interaction rather than enabling it.
okay? And underpinning all of this successful collaboration, managing that flow in complex systems, working effectively in today's world, especially with agile approaches, there's a crucial, often overlooked human skill that the sources really emphasize.
Active listening.
Active listening. The sources call it the active listening paradox, which I liked. It feels like it slows you down in the moment, right? To stop, listen, confirm understanding. But taking that time now to truly listen, understand, and make sure you're aligned saves you potentially immense time, cost, and pain later by preventing misunderstandings, rework, and heading completely off course.
Like that analogy they used. A rocket that's just slightly off angle at launch can end up miles, even millions of miles from its intended target. Small misunderstandings early on can have huge consequences later.
So why is it so difficult? If it's so important, why are we generally not great at it?
Well, our brains are kind of wired against it in some ways. We naturally filter information based on our expectations. We jump to conclusions. We predict what we think we're going to hear. And we build our own mental stories around the conversation.
So we hear what we expect to hear.
Often, yeah. That internal narrative can block out new or conflicting information that doesn't quite fit our prediction. And impatience is a huge factor, too. We're often busy formulating our brilliant response instead of truly deeply absorbing what the other person is actually saying.
So our own biology and our impatient habits work against us.
They really do. But there are techniques that help counteract that. The sources really highlight the echo back or reflective listening as key.
The echo back.
Yeah, but it's not just parroting the words back verbatim. It's rephrasing what you heard in your own words, saying something like, okay, so if I understand correctly, you're saying that. Or, so what I'm hearing is...
Okay, so you process it and reflect it back.
Exactly. It forces you to actually process the meaning. And critically, it allows the speaker to confirm, yes, that's exactly what I meant. Or, more importantly, to correct your understanding. No, actually what I was trying to say was, it aligns those mental stories before you proceed.
And it's not just about the words themselves, is it? The sources mentioned listening to tone, nonverbals, the subtext.
Absolutely crucial. A huge amount of meaning, especially the emotional context and intent, isn't conveyed just through the literal spoken words. While the exact percentages from older studies like Morabian's might be debated.
Yeah, the 738-55 rule.
Right. The core point is undeniable. Body language, tone of voice, pauses, emphasis, they carry significant weight in how communication is received and understood. You have to listen with your eyes and your intuition too, not just your ears.
And this skill, this active listening, it's absolutely foundational for building what the sources described as the 4 pillars of effective agile product and service management. Where were they again? Shared context.
Shared context, making sure everyone truly is on the same page. Mindfulness, actually being present and focused in the conversation, not mentally elsewhere. Respect, genuinely valuing the other person's input and perspective, even if you disagree. And trust, creating that psychological safety where people feel safe to be open, honest, and even vulnerable without fear of negative consequences.
Right, and without active listening, those pillars are just shaky. They don't hold up.
Exactly. Shared context requires confirming understanding. Respect is demonstrated by truly listening. Trust is built when people feel heard. It all comes back to listening.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together now. We've talked about our cognitive limits, the power of pull systems over push, the crucial importance of prioritizing people and interactions over rigid processes, and this foundational skill of active listening. How does AI intersect with all of this? Is it just going to make us faster at task switching or pushing too much work onto overloaded teams?
That's the danger, right? AI is an incredibly powerful force multiplier, and like any multiplier, it amplifies whatever patterns are already there.
Good or bad?
Good or bad. If your workflows are chaotic, If communication is poor, if you're constantly pushing too much work onto people, AI will likely just accelerate that dysfunction. It's like putting a jet engine on a car that desperately needs new steering and brakes. You'll just crash faster and more spectacularly.
I remember that customer service example you mentioned earlier where AI just made the poorly routed tickets bounce between departments even more rapidly because the underlying process issue wasn't fixed first.
Exactly. It optimized the wrong thing, the speed of bouncing, not the speed of resolution.
So it can definitely make things worse if you just bolt it on without thinking.
Absolutely. But, and this is a big but in the sources, if applied thoughtfully, strategically, AI can be truly transformative, especially within these human-centric systems we've been discussing. The sources talk about how AI can actually supercharge pull systems.
Supercharge them. How?
By turning what are often reactive pull systems waiting for a signal into more predictive, intelligent ones, while still preserving human autonomy and decision-making. That last part is key.
Okay, so how does it do that? Give me some examples.
All right, well, AI-powered work visualization, for one. Imagine your Kanban board becoming a living diagnostic tool. AI can analyze flow patterns across many items, spotting things a human would likely miss, hidden bottlenecks, dependencies causing delays, like identifying that two specific teams unknowingly cause downstream delays for each other whenever they work on related items.
So it sees patterns we can't easily spot.
Exactly. Or it might even find things like, hey, this senior engineer is consistently spending 20% of their time on unplanned mentoring, which isn't visible on the board but is impacting their task completion time. That's valuable insight.
Okay, that's powerful. What else?
Intelligent WIP optimization. Instead of just having static WIP limits, AI could suggest dynamic limits based on real-time factors, current team capacity, the measured complexity of incoming work items, even planned team absences like PTO next week. It helps prevent overload proactively, not just reactively.
So it adjusts the limits based on context.
Right. Then there are predictive pull signals. AI could move beyond just asking, is there capacity available? And consider much richer context. Which skills are needed for the waiting tasks? Are there upcoming dependencies? What's the predicted responsiveness of the stakeholder needed for the next step?
Wow.
Based on all that, it could suggest the optimal next item for a team to pull to maximize smooth flow and minimize future waiting. Imagine AI predicting, this stakeholder usually responds within 2 hours to this type of request on a Tuesday morning, maybe pull that item now.
That's getting pretty sophisticated.
It is. And finally, advanced analytics. AI is brilliant at finding subtle patterns across vast datasets of completed work. It can identify systemic bottlenecks, like discovering that only 2 people in the whole organization truly understand a critical legacy system. It can provide much more accurate forecasting for delivery times, maybe even giving you probability distributions. There's an 85% chance this feature lands in the next sprint.
Okay, better forecasting.
And it can even allow you to simulate changes to your process before you implement them. What if we increase the WIP limit here? What if we cross-train 2 more people on that system? AI could model the likely impact on flow.
That sounds incredibly powerful. But I can also see how it could feel a bit scary, like Big Brother watching the workflow. How do you ensure AI is actually helping people, not just monitoring or controlling them?
That's a critical point the sources emphasize. It has to be about human-AI collaboration. AI should act as an advisor, a co-pilot. It should offer transparent, traceable suggestions based on data. Here's why I'm suggesting this item next.
Explainable AI.
Yes. But the final decisions, what to work on, how to adjust the process, must remain firmly with the team, with the humans. Trust is absolutely paramount. AI systems used in this context should be designed to support flow and enhance team performance, explicitly not for surveillance or individual performance micromanagement.
And active listening comes back into play here too, doesn't it? Even when discussing AI's suggestions or maybe even interacting with AI systems themselves.
Right.
We need to check their outputs, ask clarifying questions, be mindful of potential biases or blind spots in their training data.
Precisely. You need to listen actively to what the AI is telling you, understand its limitations, and critically evaluate its suggestions, not just blindly accept them. And interestingly, sources suggest that adopting AI itself often works best using a pull approach.
Pulling AI adoption.
Yeah, letting teams explore their own challenges and pain points and then pull AI support tools or capabilities when and where they identify a genuine need that AI can effectively help solve, rather than having AI pushed onto them from the top down.
That makes a lot of sense. So, used well, AI can automate the tedious grunt work, maybe help us manage information overload, like that example of AI summarizing huge log files. instead of just dumping raw data on engineers.
Right, making information more digestible.
It aligns with human cognitive patterns sometimes, like batching insights, and ultimately enhances human judgment rather than replacing it. It frees people up to focus on the higher value creative work, the complex problem solving.
Exactly. It helps us apply our unique human intelligence where it's most needed and most valuable.
Okay, so to sort of bring this deep dive to a close, we've explored this productivity paradox, why just working harder or faster often leads to achieving less, largely because it ignores our fundamental cognitive limits and, well, how our brains actually function best.
And we've seen how shifting away from just pushing work onto people and towards pull systems, using those practical strategies like visualizing work, limiting work in progress, measuring flow is really key to managing the flow of value and achieving sustainable high performance, especially in product and service management contexts.
We also highlighted that fundamental principle from agile product and service management, putting individuals and interactions over processes and tools, making absolutely sure that our processes and tools serve the people doing the work and enable crucial human connection and creativity, not hinder them.
And we discussed how active listening, even though it can be challenging because of our own biology and habits, is such a foundational skill. It's vital for building that shared understanding, that trust, and effectively navigating the complexity of modern work, especially as we integrate powerful tools like AI into the mix.
And crucially, AI isn't some kind of magic bullet. It amplifies your existing patterns, the good and the bad. But as the sources clearly show, when it's applied thoughtfully, carefully, within a human-centric pull-based system, AI can significantly enhance team performance and maybe help us finally break free from that paradox of just being busy instead of being productive.
Yeah. This all leads to a final thought we want to leave you with, something for you, the listener, to consider maybe this week. Given these insights about our cognitive limits, the power of pull, the importance of people, the role of listening, what's one small change, just one thing you could try in your own work or maybe discuss with your team to start shifting even slightly towards a pull approach, or perhaps to consciously practice better active listening in your next meeting?
Just one small thing, something to think about.
Definitely. And if you want to delve deeper into the actual source material we've been discussing today, the articles, the videos, the research we pulled these insights from, including loads more specific examples, data points, and practical strategies.
You can find the links to absolutely everything right there in the description for this deep dive. Go ahead, click through, and keep exploring these really vital ideas for working smarter, more sustainably, and, well, more humanely in this age of overload and AI.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
See you next time on the Deep Dive.